Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Parent University Workshop's last workshop for our fall series. We are so happy that you are here with us today. Today, we're going to focus in on semester one. We still have 7 weeks to go. Doesn't end till January 28th, and we want to make sure that all of our students finish strong. So today we have Rebecca Fass from Parent University, who taught middle school for 18 years. We have a sixth grade math teacher joining us, Miss Fonseca Perez. And we also have Miss Lisa Gallo, who works at Lindbergh Middle School as one of our school psychologists with the Family Resource Center. We hope that you will get a lot of tips to help yourself and your students finish this semester strong. Rebecca, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining in today. And thanks for joining into our last Parent University Workshop of 2020. You know, we were supposed to actually end last week. Last week was supposed to be our last workshop, but in our suggestion box on our Parent University website, we started to get a few parents who were dropping in notes that they were concerned about specifically their sixth grader. It was interesting. We saw a theme of sixth grade parents that were dropping us notes, indicating that their sixth graders were really struggling. And they were struggling not only with online learning, but having 6 or 7 new teachers, new classmates at a new school, and they were just kind of drowning and feeling a little overwhelmed. In fact, people in our own office who have sixth graders were expressing the same thing. So I thought, you know what, as a former middle school teacher, this is a subject that's really I'm passionate about, it's close to my heart. So I thought, well, let's just add one more workshop and do a semester one check-in, because it's really important that all families and students realize, as Ms. Hodge said, it's not too late. There is still a lot of time to change your grade, bring up your grade, turn in some missing assignments, and really flip how the end of the semester might be ending for you. So we're glad you're here. We're glad you're tuning in. And I'm really happy to come to you today with two colleagues, two Long Beach Unified middle school professionals, but they're also middle school parents. All of us on the panel today here, we come to you, kind of walking the walk and living it at home too. So we're in the trenches with you. We are parents, we are middle school parents, and we're just so glad you are all here. So I'm going to jump right in here and get started on today's workshop. So by the end of today's workshop, we are really hopeful that as parents, you will have some tools to help your student. If they're struggling a bit, if they're trying to find their way in middle school, that we will provide you today with some tools. And we also are going to end our workshop today looking at growth mindset and how that can be so important to our success, not just in middle school, but really in all grade levels, that setting small goals. And Ms. Gallo is really going to take us through some growth mindset steps. In Parent University, one of our big beliefs is that parent involvement is very important, and especially in middle school. As a former middle school teacher, I used to see that so many parents would think that, oh, my kid's in middle school now, I've done my job, they are on their own. And really, this is when our kids need us more than ever. This is really when we need to check in with them, both mentally and academically, and we really need to have some check-ins. And it's proven, statistics prove that students who have involved parents in their academics will get higher grades, higher test scores, they have better attitudes, better behavior in school, they will complete their homework on a more regular basis, they have better attendance, and they are more likely to complete high school and then continue on to further education. And so parent involvement, the study after study shows how important parent involvement is on the success of our students. So let's talk about middle school. Middle school in general, even in a normal year, not in a global pandemic, middle school is a tough transition. Our kids go from a small campus with one teacher all day, and that one teacher has the time to really learn about our kids and their struggles and what they are good at. And so our kids go from having a small campus and one teacher, they go to having a larger campus with 6 or 7 new teachers. 6 or 7 teachers maybe have different personalities, they have different expectations. And so that's a lot for kids to manage. In elementary school, you get used to the same families, you see the same faces, you have the same friends, and all of a sudden you're at a middle school where you might not know all of the kids. Parents don't know all of the families, and so they're maybe feeling less likely to get involved. And so there's that change for both the kid and the family. And even just kind of moving between classes and social interactions. And there's 8th graders that are so much bigger than the 6th graders on campus. And so even in a normal year, that transition from elementary to middle school is intense. And a lot of kids have some struggle during that time. And now let's talk about this year, right? Let's talk about that change from elementary school to middle school in 2020. And it's just harder. All of those things can be a little bit harder for our kids. It's harder for them maybe to connect with their teacher. It's harder for them to connect with their peers. I hear in my own house, my own kids saying, when I'll say, turn on your camera, you should have your camera on. They say, Mom, that's so embarrassing. That's too embarrassing. So, that's real. Our kids are going through things. They're embarrassed to put themselves out there. They're embarrassed to be vulnerable in front of students that they might not know as well. And so there's all of that going on. And it's a long day online. Our kids are online from 9 to 3:40, and we have to just give them some patience and grace and recognize that, they're doing it and they're doing a good job. On a personal note, my daughter she got a bad grade on a test, and I was kind of getting on her a little bit. And she looked at me, she said, Mom, I'm doing my best. I'm online all day. And she's like, I have good grades. I just messed up on this one test. And I had to take a step back and say, you're right. You're right. And just kind of take a moment and just recognize that they really are doing a good job. They are managing a lot. And Ms. Guy is going to give us a lot of tips on how to help our kids through that part of it too. It's also hard this year with all the distractions at home, right? If our kids are at home, not only do they have a long day and all the things I just talked about, but there's the phone that's so easily accessible. They can be on their phone. And I know Ms. Fonseca Perez is going to talk a bit about that. Video games, splitting the screen is just too easy. And you might not know how to do it as parents, but our kids do, right? They can easily have their video game on one side of the screen and a class on the other, and they're playing video games right alongside. So that is common. Even happenings at home, we have, siblings who might also be on school, or younger siblings. There's the FedEx truck, the mailman, there's pets, there's dogs, they're home alone. There's just so many distractions. And so again, giving our kids some patience, giving our kids some grace during this time. And what we'll find today is that there's a few small tweaks, there's a few small tips that we hope to give you today that can have some big impact. Okay, and before I switched over to Ms. Fonseca, and before we go over a few more things, some tips, I just want to talk a little bit about the struggle here, and especially for accelerated students. Sometimes, and especially accelerated boys, we would sometimes find they have this really hard time switching from elementary school to middle school, because in elementary school, things might have come so easy. They might have been the top of their math class. They might have always known the answer. Elementary school, the grading is pretty holistic. They get a grade of a proficient or advanced proficient, and teachers would be with them all day long, and teachers would really be able to assess the student all day long and grade them accordingly. In middle school, it's different. In middle school, that homework assignment counts for a grade. That test and all of the little projects and group work, it all gets graded. And some of the accelerated students who aren't used to having to do every little assignment and turn in every little thing, all of a sudden now they're being graded for those assignments. And they get overwhelmed with all the grades. And so it's very common for some of our most accelerated students to not do so well all of a sudden in middle school. Even though they're smart as a whip, they're not doing good because they're not turning in their assignments, they're not completing their work. And so we see that also in middle school. And so I hope what maybe you are picking up here is that struggle is normal, and that it's okay if the kids are having a little bit of struggle, and then that your student is not unique, that transition between elementary school and middle school, it can be difficult for a lot of kids. Okay, so we're here though today to give you some tips. We surveyed teachers from across the district, from different middle schools, and we said, what is the number one tip that you would give families to help their sixth grader, to help their middle schooler be successful? Okay, so Ms. Fonseca, I'm going to pass it on to you as we go through here some tips for parents and students from middle school teachers.
My name is Christine Fonseca Perez, and I've been a middle school teacher for 25 years. And as I share these tips with you, they are coming from the perspective of a teacher and as a parent of a middle schooler. So the number one thing I would say is create a learning space for success. So many times I'm teaching and I can see students, they're laying on a couch or on a bed, or they're kind of moving around the screen in the back trying to gather their stuff. So make sure that they have earphones so they're not distracted by everything else around them, that they have a table to work on. If you have multiple students in a room, have a way to separate them so that they're not distracted by the sibling in the background, especially if they're in different grades. So the elementary and the middle school have different schedules. There'll be movement around that distracts. Keep materials in a box and a backpack. So for example, my personal children, they have their backpack ready to go like they would if it was a normal school day. And they have it next to their desk like if they were going to school physically. They prepare their backpack the night before and are ready to use it the next day. So Ms. Bass, could you switch the screen for me, please? One more. I think the next slide, Ms. Fast. Thank you. Nope, sorry, 2, monitoring. I must have been a delay, sorry. Monitoring routines. Okay, so we all have routines in our house when it is a normal school year, whether it is the alarm bell goes, they get up, they have breakfast, they shower, they get dressed. Students still need a morning routine because that's what kind of triggers them being prepared for school. If the alarm is going off at 8:55 and class starts at 9 and they're literally jumping out, putting a hat on, it's going to take them a while before they're even able to focus on instruction. So whatever that routine is for your house, it could be sharpening pencils, drinking water, having breakfast, brushing your teeth, changing clothes. But give it a good amount of time so that there is no rushing, because when there is rushing, there's a delay in students getting to class on time, or it takes them a while to start focusing in class because they're still trying to gather themselves. Whereas if they were in school, they would be in class and they would no longer be trying to eat their breakfast, get changed. They would be already ready to start. The next slide, please. Okay, so the next one, students need to be to class on time. In school, you can physically see them come in tardy and there's a disruption to the class because the door opens and closes. But when they're late to the online classes, what's happening is the teacher gives us directions at the first 5 minutes or the learning target for the day. And then a student comes in, and if they have missed that part, the teacher needs to repeat it again, okay, which delays everybody else in the class from picking up what's going on. And so then moments later, another bing, and another student comes in 30 seconds later, and another 30 seconds later. So it's really a disruption to your own child and to the rest of the class. And that can set the whole rest of the class in either a good direction or a bad direction. If they're late and they don't know what they're doing, they're lost for a really long time. And as a teacher, it is very hard to catch them up sometimes because you've got questions coming up in the chat regarding the students who are on task, who got there on time, and you're trying to answer those questions. And then you have the students who got there late and you're trying to explain to them what they need to be doing. So it is really, really important that they get there on time. And on time doesn't mean log in exactly when class starts. It means log in 2 minutes before class starts so that you're literally just waiting for the teacher to let you in on the Zoom. Okay. So this one is probably one of the hardest things I think our 6th graders, probably all students are struggling with, is making connections and feeling kind of isolated. And as a teacher, it's hard for me because I really enjoy seeing my students every day. And as students, I really encourage my students to have their camera on. During my class as a whole, I like to see their smiles. I like to have them have their camera on when they're in breakout rooms. Their friends don't know if they're there or not there, or how to encourage them if they can't see their face. So please encourage your child to turn their camera on. most of us don't have the best camera look. And it's okay. We're not supposed to be in a movie theater like, you know, actors and actresses. We're human beings. And I think it's hard for students, but it's really important that they do it, because once they start turning their camera more and they start interacting with other students, they're going to have more of a connect with what is going on in school. I try to say hello and goodbye to my students every day, but sometimes I forget. And it's so nice when a student reaches out and says hello, or at the end of class says, thank you very much, Senora Fonseca, goodbye. With students in the chat, or they might take their mic off and they'll say, oh, Maria, that was a really good response. That helped me understand. And you can see Maria's face, you know, light up because someone noticed them. They felt appreciated. So as hard as it is for your child sometimes to put themselves out there, please encourage them to share in the chat or on their mic positive statements about their peers, about their teachers. That positive vibe will help everybody get through. Okay, the next one is the planner. So I think organization is probably one of the biggest struggles, because in elementary school, you had the one teacher with the one board where they laid out everything for the day, and it was easy to write down in the planner. Now, some teachers say what the homework is at the beginning of the period, some say it at the end of the period, some teachers say, look for it on Canvas, you'll know what you have to do there. So there's a lot of different places the child needs to figure out how to organize themselves. But if they have a planner, it's like a to-do list for them. Like, did I ask my ELA teacher what my assignment was today? And if they don't have homework, they should write no homework, because if they leave it blank, it's kind of, do I have homework? Do I not have homework? So it's really important that you use a planner for them to write it down. But also for the parent to check at the end of the day. There's so many parents that contact me and they say, well, I don't know what are they supposed to do? Where do they go to check it? And so if you see a blank planner, you know your child needs help figuring this out. And also, sometimes you might be confused when you wrote it down in the planner and the student wrote it down in the planner. They go home and they're trying to do the homework, but they're not clear. So one of the things that we really encourage is that you get a contact of somebody in the class so that you can send them a message, whether it's an email, to say, hey, you know, what did you understand this to be? Versus waiting to the next day to be able to catch up on an assignment, because then you start falling behind. So again, a planner is really important for the student to make sure they understood everything they need to do, for the parent to see what the child needs to do. So I very much encourage them to have a planner. And a lot of schools gave out a planner. So if you don't have a planner, contact your school to see if they can give you a planner. Ms. Fast, I'm going to go back to you.
Thanks, Ms. Fonseca. I'm going to take over just a few slides here. Something that came from a lot of the teachers that we asked about, you know, what would be the tip that you would give for a student who's struggling, for a parent who's struggling to help? Many of the middle school teachers said, have parents check Canvas every day. If your student is struggling, if you are noticing in their grades that they are not doing as well, Canvas is really great resource for you to really see exactly what the student is missing, exactly to see what they need work on. And so I'm just going to take you through a few parts of Canvas. As Parent University, we did a whole workshop on Canvas. We sent out a Canvas tip of the week for the last few months in your Monday email that you get from us. So if you want to learn more about Canvas, the resources are certainly there. So if I go too fast, or if you want more clarity on any of the things I'm about to go through, please check out our website. Please check out our Long Beach Unified homepage, where there's a great Canvas link right there so you can learn more. But let me just go through a few tips. If you haven't already paired your account as an observer, I highly recommend that you do so. If you pair your account as a parent observer, For those of you who have older students, or if you've ever had a 7th or 8th grader, it's a great way to see, especially if you download the app, it's a great way to just get a glimpse of how your student is doing. You can quickly see their grades on the app. And so if your parent is an observer, you get kind of the parent version of Canvas, and it gives you a glimpse into what the kids are doing and how your student is doing. In the Observer app, you still get a great to-do list. It has all the assignments that are coming up. You can see easily the student grades. Oops, let me advance to the next slide here. Here we go. Okay, oops, sorry. Through Canvas, you can see the types of assignments. So you can see whether it's a homework assignment, whether it's a test, whether it's a project, whether it was a class discussion, whether it's an essay. So there's different types of categories, and usually those categories carry different weight in the class. In Canvas, you can check to see the grades on those assignments, and you get an overall grade on the assignment in Canvas. So here's just kind of a glimpse into what your Canvas might look like. And so here you can see a Canvas calendar. And so when I look at the calendar, and that's an option in Canvas, and I apologize, I realize this is blurry, but hopefully you can just see that there's lots of assignments in here. And so here it says here that there's a homework and classwork assignment. On this Thursday, there was, there's a warm up. There was an algebra assignment. It has all of the assignments for the week, from warm-ups to classwork to activities. So you can see all of the assignments in a calendar style. And I apologize, I'm moving my mouse and it is moving the screen around a little bit here for me. In Canvas, you can also see a list of the grades. So this is, while this is a very convenient list, I will say this is kind of a confusing part of Canvas, because if you have 2 students, it's going to mix up the grades here. So when I look at Canvas, I have a student in middle school and I have a student in high school. It puts all the grades in one long list in no particular order. So, you know, what are we going to do? Pros and cons with Canvas there, but you can quickly look down the list and you can see the grades. And so as a parent, I'm okay with all these grades, but I'm not so much okay with that 60% grade. So on that grade, I might then click on this account and check it out. I might not have to worry about the 90%. I'm not going to do some digging and investigate on that one, but I'm going to look at the 60% and I'm going to click on Spanish language arts and I'm going to investigate why. And I'm going to try to figure out what my student can do to maybe boost that 60% up. And so when you click on that grade, when you click on that account, it's going to take you to a list of assignments. And here again, I apologize, it's blurry. The screenshots weren't coming out too good when we were putting this together. For each one, you're going to have a title. It has the due date, and then it has the score. So it tells you what the assignment, what it is worth, and what your student received. So here, this person got a 20 out of 20, a 20 out of 20 on a lot of these assignments. And so you might want to look to see the assignments, what the title was, and what your student received. So again, you can see the score on the individual assignments. So you get a holistic grade, and then you can break it down into the smaller grades. I invite you to even look a little bit further. You can see here at the bottom, you see their total grade. And here's where it gets really in middle school, especially, here's where you can see a lot of difference. And so you'll see that there's a classwork category and there is a homework category. And you can see the students' percentage on both. Often when I taught middle school, homework is typically only worth 10% of their total grade. And so I might have had a parent that would call me and say, you know what, my student's done all their homework. What's going on? Why is their grade so low? And I'll say, well, they did all their homework, but they didn't do very good on the test. And in a class, for example, like math, it would make me wonder, you know, maybe just because they're getting their homework done, are they understanding their homework? Are they putting effort into their homework? And let's be honest, are they just copying the homework from a friend? Are they, you know, it's so easy for students to ask Alexa all of the questions for the homework and then really not understand how they're doing it. And so just because they're, oh, I just talked to Alexa and my Alexa went off. My apologies. Technology. Sorry about that. That just threw me off a little bit. Alexa's still talking to me here. Okay, sorry. But that's what students do. They're engaging with her all day long and asking for the answers. And so you might want to check to see how are they doing on homework and tests and quizzes. Okay, let me go to the next slide here and get off of, I don't want to say her name. And then when you go into Alexa, or not when you go into Alexa, sorry, when you go into Canvas, you can see those breakdowns, right? So you can see that homework is only worth 10%, Classwork might be worth 30%, quizzes might be worth even more. So really get into the weeds of your students' assignments. And here's where also I would tell parents, we're going to talk a little bit about this later too, is if your student is missing a ton of homework assignments and a ton of classwork assignments, you know, that's really stressful to think about at this point, maybe going back and redoing or submitting all of those assignments. Go into the categories and look and say, okay, if they're missing a project that's worth a lot of points, maybe that would be the assignment you would want your student to do. If they're missing an assignment that's worth 30 points as opposed to an assignment that's worth 5 or 10, that would be the assignment you would want to encourage your student to go back and do. It can be very overwhelming for a student to think, well, I have 30 missing assignments. Where do I start? That's overwhelming. Have them pick one assignment. Have them pick maybe the one that's worth the most points. Have them pick the assignment that's due tomorrow. You know, really focus on setting those small goals, and using these categories, using the weighted categories in the Canvas can really help kind of focus in on what's most important. You know, doing all those tiny little homework assignments, it's worth less than 10% of their total grade. So using Canvas and really digging into the specific categories can really help parents, you know, help their students. Okay, and if you have further questions about Canvas, when you get into Canvas, there's a Canvas help button that you can click on, and there's all kinds of guides to help you navigate through Canvas, because it is new. It's new for all of us. It's new for teachers, it's new for students, and it's new for parents. So if you need more help through Canvas, there's lots of tools on the Long Beach Unified website and embedded right into the Canvas app itself. Okay, Ms. Fonseca, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Okay.
Pick up some more tips from middle school teachers. So Ms. Fonseca, you're up.
Okay, so I think this one is the hardest for parents. I tell my parents at the beginning, during back to school night, that I really, really encourage them to encourage their child to do the initial communication with a concern. We are so used to, as parents in elementary school, to be the one who goes and talks to the teacher to try to solve the problem. In sixth grade, one of the things we want to start training our children to do is to speak up for themselves, that it's okay to question something that's going on in class. It's not being disrespectful to a teacher. They're just needing clarification. And so I would sit with your child even the first few times and help them draft an email, because some students maybe don't even know the formal language that you might want to use in an email. So once you start showing them, well, this is how you would write it, and what do you want to tell them, and they're using their voice in a formal email, and then they get a response from the teacher, they're going to see like, okay, that wasn't too bad. Like, let me do it the next time. But if we as parents continue to be the one that says, okay, well, I'll ask the teacher about that, or I'll get clarification, then the child is not being an advocate for their own education. And therefore, they're just kind of, they might start letting things go because it's not really important to them. It's important to you as a parent, but not to them. So you need to teach them why it's important, why their education is important, and why it's important for them to advocate for themselves. So please have them email their teacher first. And then, of course, as a parent, if you're not happy with the response or you need further clarification, then follow up with an email yourself. The other part is students need to advocate for themselves in breakout rooms. I know my own children say sometimes breakout rooms are frustrating because they go into a breakout room and everybody turns their screens off, nobody's talking, and they have a group project they need to do. So it's frustrating. So what I tell my children and I tell my students is, you need to say, you know, Pedro, can you turn on your screen? Can you share your thoughts with me? Anna, what do you think about this? And once you've gone through everybody in the group and you've tried to get information, go back to the teacher and say, I'm trying in my group, but nobody's got their camera on. No one's responding. A teacher will appreciate that. It's not tattletaling. It's saying, I care about my education and I'm not getting anything out of this breakout room. So it's very important that they advocate for themselves. Next screen. Thank you. Okay, participation. So I have found that Zoom classes, the kids who are very confident have no problem taking off their mic and participating whenever they want. And the quieter child just is more comfortable just being quiet, maybe even turning off their screen, and then they really are like not even in the class. And participation is so much of the learning process. When we dialogue about what we're learning, when we question what we're learning, your brain's processing, and therefore you're learning more. So it's really important that we encourage our children to participate. Setting a goal, participate once every class. And participate might not mean take the mic off and speak. Participate might be sharing in the chat a response or perspective. And I think that's the nice thing about Zoom, that for those quieter kids who don't want to have their voice heard in class, their voice can be heard through a typed format in the chat box. So it's very important that they participate. I had a situation this week, so I'm telling you all parents, you should do a Zoom with somebody else not in school, and check the mic and the camera communication on a Zoom call with somebody else. Because what I found this week is I had a student who wasn't participating, and I would ask in the chat, I would ask verbally, like, can you please turn on your camera, share with me your thoughts, and I wasn't getting anything. And when we went into a parent conference this week, and I asked the parent to log into the Zoom and try to turn on their camera, they couldn't. And another parent, when they could, it kept logging the child off. And so the child might not realize these are technological issues that can be fixed. All they need to do is contact their school and figure out, can I get another computer? Because this one is not allowing me to participate in class. So I think that's one of my big takeaways this week is I never asked my parents to check the mic and the camera on all their computers. And that would be very helpful for their students. And second is I would encourage parents, if your child has lower grades, that you check the history on the computer on a daily basis. You will see if your child has been on Fortnite or YouTube, or ask them every day, so what did you learn today? And if they can't give you anything back, or they have no notes that they took from that day, it's letting you know that they're not engaged in class. And the last one.
Ms. Fonseca, before we go on, you got your volume, speaking of checking microphones, got a little wonky just then. Could you just repeat what you think? Because I think it's so good. I think it's worth stopping and having you repeat. Could you repeat one more time what you think parents should do if they want to check to see how many minutes or how long the student's been on?
Sure. So, two things I said. One is make sure that the camera and the mic work on the computer by doing a Zoom with another family member somewhere else.
And then the next one?
And the second one, that I said check the history on the computer to see what they have been on, because through the history you can see if they've been on YouTube, if they've been on Fortnite. A lot of students go onto Discord, which is a text messaging. Maybe you even see apps, like some students use math apps to solve their problems. So they're not really engaged in the problems. It's like an Alexa. They just type in what the problem is, and then they share with the teacher. So you could see that in the history what they had been accessing during the day.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, tip number 9, here we go.
Okay, so turn in work. So turning in work, I think, is one of the hardest things for students to manage, turning in work, because it's not a physical piece of paper they just turned in, and they have to remember, did I click? Did I press submit? Sometimes they think they press submit, then they left their computer and they didn't actually press submit, so now it's late. So that aspect has been challenging for a lot of students, and know that teachers understand that it's hard to manage the classes, it's hard to turn in things on time. But I also want students to realize that as a teacher, when they turn in work late, it's a really big problem, because now I have to go back in and check that one student's work. And just to check that one student's work, it might take me 18 different clicks to get in there and update their personal score. Versus when I open a whole class, I can see everybody, grade everybody, input everybody at one go. If one day one kid turns it in late, the next day another kid. If I have 15 kids turning in work late every day, it's extra work on a teacher that doesn't need to happen. I think most teachers from that I've talked to in different schools are pretty reasonable about homework being able to get done. So if you see your child is really struggling to keep up turning in work and finishing work, talk to the teachers about what is the expectation? How long should my child be working on these assignments? Because they're struggling turning it in on time. You know, they're staying up really late. They're sixth graders and they shouldn't really have that much homework. I would say an hour and a half max. So if they're taking a lot longer than that, you should try to address it with the teachers. And that will help them turn in work in on time if they're managing their workload. And like Ms. Fass said, if you have a lot of late assignments now with your child, start with the most recent, because if you try to do all of them, you're probably going to fall behind with the current ones. So little by little, come up with a game plan with your teacher on how to turn those in, and what the most important ones are, because some assignments might be worth 2 points. Maybe they're not worth going back and redoing, but the 40-point assignment, it really is worth putting a lot more effort into. So you need to kind of prioritize if you have late work that you need to turn in. But try to get it in on time, because you'll make a happy teacher.
And I will kind of piggyback on that, Ms. Fonseca Perez. A lot of the teachers that we talked to, a lot of the teachers that we said, what's your one tip? We got back just these 3 words: turn in work. Turn in work. If the kids were simply just turning in the work, they would be doing fine. So making sure your kid is turning in the work, that is really the best thing they can do. And again, as she said, start with tonight's homework. You know, don't worry about September 30th or October 15th. Work on homework tonight. And then tomorrow, do the same thing. Do tomorrow night's homework. And even if you start today and you continue to do that through January 28th, that grade is bound to go up. And so, you know, just, I know sometimes you can look at the missing assignments and get overwhelmed. Then that's understandable. Really just start with tonight's homework. On Ms. Fonseca Perez's topic too of late work, you know, you have to also remember that in elementary school, teachers have 30 students. In middle school and in high school, teachers have between 150 to 200 students, and they are managing 6 or 7 classes. And so when you have 5 kids from each period that's turning in late work, you know, that builds up for the teacher end too. So there's a lot of things that are just different from elementary school to middle school. And the biggest tip was just turn in work. If students are doing their work and turning it in, they're going to be doing okay.
And I also wanted to add, one of the reasons turning in work is not just for the fact of turning it in, but as a teacher, the night before, I'm looking at the work that's come in and it's guiding what I'm going to do the next day. So if your child's not understanding, they should still turn something in or communicate to the teacher, this is where I'm confused, this is what I don't understand, versus not turning in anything at all. Because as a teacher, I'm a math teacher, so if I look and I see, oh wow, they're all getting number 14 wrong, I know that the very first thing I need to do the next day is number 14. So sometimes kids say, well, I didn't know what to do, so that's why I didn't do it. Well, that doesn't give me information, because maybe they can do all of them except for number 14. So it gives the teacher a lot of information of how to best help your child too. So please turn in work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ms. Fonseca. I'm going to now pass it off to Ms. Gallo, because as we've given lots of kind of tool belts and between Canvas and turning in work and all the things in the classroom, there's also the social emotional aspect. Our kids, you know, again, that change from elementary school to middle school, that's a big change. And there's a lot of things going on for kids, and they get embarrassed easily and they don't want to be vulnerable in front of their classmates. And so Ms. Gallo, I'm going to pass it over to you, who's our Long Beach Unified School psychologist, and she's going to take us through the social emotional aspect of that of 6th grade and what plays into that too. So Ms. Gallo, it's all yours.
Thank you. So as parents, we need to definitely practice number 9, which is patience and grace with a growth mindset. And this is the quote that I feel relates to that. The way that we talk to our children becomes their inner voice. So often we as parents have to be mindful of our thoughts and how they might be a fixed way of thinking. We often do this when we parent from the future and we're not in the present moment. And so we begin to worry about how their current performance is an indication of their future success. And we begin to get triggered, and the what ifers come. The what if they fail middle school? What if they don't get into the high school of their choice? Or what if they're not prepared for college? And when we get into this mindset and we start speaking from that space, we are not practicing a growth mindset, we're practicing a fixed mindset. And so in order to use this experience that we're all going through to teach resilience, we need to practice growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So many times our fixed mindset creeps in when we listen to that inner critic, and this is as parents, as students, and we use our growth mindset when we tap into the part of us that's like an inner coach. So this is just an example of some things that happen when you have a fixed mindset. You give up easily, and challenges are very difficult. And accepting criticism can also be a challenge, and sometimes feeling threatened by the success of others. And a growth mindset is looking at failure as an opportunity to grow, and knowing that challenges help you grow, and having an effort and attitude, they determine your ability. And feedback is constructive, and finding inspiration from success of others. And the next slide. Okay, so what we recommend is being a growth mindset family. And so in order to do this, we want to model, these are do's and don'ts. So when we model growth mindset and affirmations, I'm going to show an example of that in a little bit. When we help our child solve problems instead of reacting to them, and when we praise using good job, finishing all your assignments, being specific. So on the other side it says the don'ts are modeling a fixed mindset, comparing your child to other children, criticizing your child for making mistakes, and then giving non-specific praise like good job. So when you practice growth mindset, you praise the process, saying good job on finishing a late assignment, being more specific. And then you also help your child develop goals with their everyday life. Next slide. So some examples of growth mindset statements and affirmations would be the following here. So mistakes help me learn and grow. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm on the right track. So these are some examples of that. Positive affirmations, they're basically simple sentences that people use to describe how they want to feel or what they want their circumstance to be. And they're written in a way that affirm that it's already true, or that it's on its way to becoming true. And what research shows is that when we stay focused on negative words and thoughts, we actually can damage key structures of our body and brain that can regulate memory and feelings and emotions. So we really want to not do that, and we want to practice the opposite, which is positive affirmations, because they're really effective in combating that and combating negative ruminations, which for me is the same thing as the fixed mindset. So an example of how you can use this chart is you can ask your child one or two of these that resonate with them, that feel like, okay, that's something that I would want to see every day, and maybe write on an index card or a Post-it to help me tap into the growth mindset. And so as you can see on the next screen is an example of how that can be posted in your child's workstation, and it can just help them affirm and be in that, again, that growth mindset. And then the next screen We can also create goals using a growth mindset. So when we focus on creating goals, they should change your habits and actions over the long term. They should zero in on the actions you'll need to take to accomplish what you desire and have a clear vision of what you want it to look like. So make goals that will help reach the vision that you have. So in the following one, we have some examples based on the presentation that we did today of tips that we can use as daily goals for our kids, okay? And again, I would choose one or two to focus on, and this can be used in different ways. It can be used as something where you pick something and then have your child write it out. It can be used as a checklist. So I have it written here as affirmations, and this is not meant to be something that is punitive, but more of like a small daily promise that the child is making to themselves. And another thing you can do is create semester goals, and you can put them on the refrigerator. And so here's an example of that in the next slide. So here's an example of one on an index card that has an academic goal and then a personal goal. And then this way your child is practicing growth mindset for both school and for personal use. And so this is one that I did with my daughter. So I just wanted to share that. And thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Gallo. I think these are great, right? Really approachable, practical goals. I loved how you had the goals on the keyboard so that the student can see them all the time. I think I might try that one with my students or my kids at home. But really having that, it's not too late yet, right? That fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So thank you for sharing that with us. And then just to conclude here, we want to thank all of you parents who are still with us here today. And final tip is it's not too late. As Ms. Hodge said at the beginning, we still have 7 weeks before the end of the semester. The semester does not end till the end of January. There is still time to excel on a test, turn in an assignment that is worth a lot of points. There is still time to bring those grades up. Don't worry about those assignments from September. Start with tomorrow. How are you going to be engaged tomorrow? I love Ms. Fonseca's tip about just participate once every day in every class, whether it's in a chat, whether it's asking a question, answering a question. That's a small goal that can really have some big results. Small things that can have big impact. Turning in your work tomorrow. Saying hello to the teacher, saying hello to a classmate. Those little things, if you have these small goals, can really have a big impact and really make an academic and an emotional difference for your student before the end of the semester. And the idea of yet, right? Working on completing tomorrow's assignments, go from there. The semester is not over yet. So there's still time. It's not too late to help our kiddos really end this first semester of 6th grade, or if you're here, is it elementary school or high school or different grade level, ending the semester wherever you are, on a positive note. And so thank you for joining in today. Ms. Hodge, I think I'm going to pass it over to you to finish us up, I think.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much to our presenters today. We are so happy that you joined us, and we also hope that you heard at least one tip that will help your student finish the semester one stronger than where they are right now. We look forward to seeing you again for our spring series, which begins in March. In the meantime, please visit the Parent University webpage found at lbschools.net. There you'll be able to find our YouTube channel with our recorded workshops from our last 9 workshops, or the 9 workshops we've had this fall, workshops from last year, and also self-guided workshops. I would also like to take an opportunity to thank the Office of Media and Marketing Services. Without their help and expertise, we wouldn't be able to put on this production. So until we meet again, please stay safe and healthy.